In Stage 1 of Cambridge Latin course, we are introduced to two different cases, the nominative and the ablative. We are introduced to three grammatical functions: subject, predicate nominative, and the object of the preposition. We'll see both linking verbs and action verbs and understand how those are used and where they show up in the sentence, because Latin word order is fairly flexible. And then we also meet the very important but very irregular verb to be, the principal parts of which are sum, esse, fui. In these four sentences, obviously as the plot goes, we're introduced to the characters of the Cambridge Latin course series who we are going to interact with throughout stages 1 through 12. But grammatically, what's important about these sentences is in the sentence caecilius est pater, we have a subject, caecilius. Est is a form of the verb to be, it means is, and then pater is what's called a predicate nominative. And that is important because it's a nominative case word. It doesn't have an ending that denotes another case, but it's not the subject. A predicate nominative is something that comes after the verb to be. And because the verb to be is a linking verb, not an action verb, it doesn't take a direct object, it takes a predicate nominative. So if you think of the verb to be est as an equal sign, you can't have a nominative on one side and another case on the other side. We have to have the same case on both sides. So we have both the nominative and the nominative case, but only one of those is the subject. Metella is the subject, Metella is, and then what is she? She is the mother, and that's what's called the predicate nominative. In these sentences, we have two more examples of having a subject, the verb to be, and the predicate nominative. Here we've got subject, verb to be, and predicate nominative. Notice that the verb to be shows up in the middle of the sentence. That is the case with most linking verbs. Action verbs will be different. In these two sentences on the right-hand side, we've got subject, verb to be, and then two prepositional phrases, in tablino and in atrio. And here we are introduced to the ablative case. The nominative of this word is tablinum. And so this O ending means that it is in the ablative case. And what you're going to find out is the most common use of the ablative case in Latin is for the object of a preposition. The ablative case does not require a preposition. You will meet down the road many uses of the ablative without, but many prepositions take ablative objects, and they are very often kind of stationary prepositions. And that's something to keep in mind because some prepositions actually take the accusative case, and we'll meet those in a couple chapters. But if the preposition involves motion, especially motion towards, they will usually, those prepositions will usually take accusative objects. But if there is no motion involved, in this case, she is in the atrium, she's not moving around it, she's not walking through it, that preposition and prepositions like that often take the ablative case. Here we have four more sentences that have prepositional phrases. In triclinio, in horto. So this thing, in horto, that is a prepositional phrase. The word in is a preposition, and the grammatical function of horto is object of the preposition. So a prepositional phrase will not include a verb. It usually will be a preposition followed by a noun. If there's an adjective in there, that's great. But prepositional phrase will, the two most important parts of a prepositional phrase are the prep and the object. These both are also prepositional phrases. The different ending for this noun, kulina and wia, it's different because those nouns are in the first declension, whereas these nouns are in the second, and we'll talk about declensions in another video. In this slide, we see the difference between the word order of sentences that have linking verbs, pater, est, and tablino. Linking verbs usually show up in the middle, versus action verbs. Pater, scribit, writing is an action verb, and those verbs usually show up at the end of a sentence. Not always. Latin word order is very flexible, but if you were to identify a pattern, if a sentence includes a linking verb, you will read it very often left to right. If the sentence includes an action verb, you will very often start with the subject, usually shows up at the beginning, not always, jump to the end, that's the action verb, and then jump backwards, in this case, for the prepositional phrase. If there were a direct object, it often shows up in the middle as well. So keep in mind that linking verbs usually show up in the middle of a sentence, and action verbs usually show up at the end. So you met the nominative case, which was used for the subject and the predicate nominative in these sentences. You met the ablative case, which is used as an object of a preposition. It's one of two cases that can be used as the object of a preposition in Latin. And then we talked about the linking verb that we met today was est, which means is, but any form of the verb to be, sum esse fui, like am or was or were or will be, is a linking verb, and after a linking verb, that's when you see this predicate nominative. We talked about Latin word order, specifically that the subject usually comes in the beginning. A linking verb will usually appear in the middle, and an action verb will usually appear at the end. Not set in stone. Latin word order is very flexible, especially when you get into longer and more complicated sentences in poetry, but for the purposes of the Cambridge Latin Course series, that is a pattern that they will follow pretty closely.